Hey everybody, Syntax77 here, and for this video we're going to do a classic What's in My Pack video for my winter backpacking gear list. Now, along with this, I do have a gear list that I made, and I'll be posting a link to that in the description so you can see a detailed account of all the weights and everything. I actually made it on I used to use a site called Geargrams, and then thanks to the viewers out there, you sent me some suggestions, and I switched over to using it's Lighter Pack. I keep forgetting that for some reason. Lighterpack.com. I do like it so far more than Geargrams. Seems a little nicer interface, so I have no affiliation with them or anything, but I did use them and I've just been playing with it recently. In fact, on my phone here I made a PDF copy of it, and I have that on my website that you can print out and kind of play the home game as we go through this list here. It has all the weights, descriptions, everything. I really tried to make it as comprehensive as possible. And then also I'll put a link. I believe I can just share a link to it right on Lighter Pack. And for those of you that like to do it that way, you can check it out like that. It also should be pointed out, this is a hammock system that I'm using. So if you use a tent, keep that in mind. Now my intention for this video is for it to be useful as a standalone video where you can get an idea of what somebody, just one person, goes out into wilderness with on a winter backpacking trip. Whether you've never done it before and you want to see what somebody might take out, or maybe you already do it and you're like me, you just like to see all different ways to do stuff. So hopefully this will be useful for you. Now this is going to be in depth. If you're not familiar with the channel, I go kind of deep with these videos. If that's not for you, that's fine, but if it is, strap in. We're going to nerd out on the contents of this pack. I'm going to go through everything. Now you will notice on that gear list I made, and this is thanks to the website, it automatically makes a little pie chart for you, and then based on the categories, which I did create, it breaks everything down and you can see how things stack out there. So you'll see the base weight for this is a little under 15 pounds. Let's just call it 15 pounds base weight. Now that means it does not include consumables, anything like food, fuel, things that would be a variable based on the length of the trip that you are consuming. And then that 15 pounds also doesn't include anything that I'm wearing. Although, out of fairness, that is on here as well. And you can see, because it's a winter trip, there is a lot of clothing. As a matter of fact, the clothing worn is actually 7 pounds, which sounds insane, but you'd be surprised when you start actually weighing all your stuff like I did, and I took a scale, weighed all this item by item. That really does add up, especially when you got boots and stuff like that. Another thing I will point out for this trip, this is basically temperature-wise what I consider my worst case scenario. So this is going to be for a cold weather trip. I have used this same clothing system that you're about to see as low as -20. It wasn't necessarily fun, but I got through it. Now, I don't anticipate that temperature at all where I'm going. I'm going to the Grayson Highlands. Now, it could very well be in the teens or even single digits when you add in the higher elevation, and it's apparently pretty windy down there. Or because of the area and whatnot, it could very well be the complete opposite. It could be 38 or 42 degrees or something. So for the sake of this video, and this is also the way I like to plan anyway, I'm going to pack and show you guys the worst case scenario, which is the kind of 0 degree setup. And then as I get closer to going on the actual trip, I can, because it's a layer system, just omit layers either on the trail or at the trailhead, just say, you know what, it's way too nice out here. We don't need all this stuff. So just pointing that out. Another thing I want to point out, and you'll see here, I have my new multicam version of the ULA Ohm 2.0 pack. This will be my first trip using this. Most of the contents of the pack are the same winter system I've been using for a couple years, but the pack itself is new, so I'm excited about that, and this will be my first trip taking it out. I do want to point out, this is what I would call a regular winter trip, as opposed to what I would call a deep winter trip. A lot of you would think maybe deep winter just means really cold, but when I say that, deep winter, I mean a more aggressive trip in terms of snow and ice conditions. Like a trip that I did a few weeks ago with my friend Mike where we went up to New Hampshire. I would call that a deep winter trip. You're going to need gear to deal with things such as 6 foot plus of snow, hard ice with wind conditions blowing you around. You know, like a trip where you might need something like crampons, a shovel, ice axe, etc. In fact, I'm not even bringing these micro spikes on this trip, I don't believe. I'm up in the air on that, but this would be like a light traction compared to those crampons. I'm not even bringing that on this trip. I just don't think I'm going to need it. So for a trip like that, this pack would not work. And I tried for fun, just to let you guys know. I did try for the trip Mike and I did, attaching all that gear to this, but it's a no-go. And that's no fault of the pack. It's not designed for that. Now, this isn't even ULA's biggest pack. It's like their middle-sized one, I believe. Even more importantly, for all of this kind of crap, you're going to want attachment points, and that is not happening on this pack. So when we did that other trip that I just talked about, I actually took out the new, for those of you who saw the video on the Scandinavian gear pack, snap the hip belt on here. it works. I said I was going to test that on a winter trip. I did take it out, and that worked out pretty well. So maybe for a future vid, I'll do a deep winter backpacking gear list, but just want to let you know that's what this trip is for. Cold weather, but not necessarily like going up the side of Mount Washington or building a snow cave somewhere. Now on my gear list, it is organized like I said. So if you're playing the home game, just go to the particular category that an item's in and you'll see the details on it. I did put all those weights in ounces, by the way. Sorry, I had to pick one or the other. That's what my country uses. But look, quick trick. If I say an ounce, it's 28.3 grams. Make it easy, call it 28. Make it super easy if you're not really uptight about it, call it 30 grams. Every time I say an ounce, it's a little under 30 grams, all right? So anyway, I will be talking in ounces. Sorry, guys. Let's get started taking some items out here while I got it up on this pedestal, and then we'll lower it. First thing here, what's that? Piece of Tyvek is what that is. Only weighs 4 ounces or so, and this is a 6 by 3 foot piece. It goes underneath my hammock. It gives me a dry place to get out if I don't have my boots on yet, or if I want to get changed, or if I want to spread my gear out, put my pack down without it being on the snow or just the wet ground, depending on conditions. This is nice. You notice it has that kind of beat up look to it, and it's a little softer. And listen, it doesn't sound too crinkly compared to this brand new piece. Now, that's not just from using it, just when you first get it, throw it in the washing machine just on cold and let it run, and it will soften it up. And I have actually washed this in the washing machine after a couple trips, and it has gotten really soft, but it's still nice and waterproof and quiet. Next up is a water storage vessel, and I also have one on the other side. Two different things going on here, right? This is a disposable water bottle. It's 1.5 liters. I use these quite often. If it's not winter, I use 2 of these. That's it. Works just fine. This thing weighs like a ½ ounce or something crazy, 14 grams. This, on the other hand, is made by a company called 40 Below. It's a neoprene sleeve for a 1 liter bottle. Looks like an Nalgene. It's actually not an Nalgene, but it's very similar. The reason I like this is it is nice and soft, so it won't get brittle enough to crack, which I've never had happen with an Nalgene, but apparently they take these on pretty severe Arctic expeditions. My friend Mike gave it to me as a gift, and they hold up really well. On top of that, it is heat resistant, so I can boil water and pour it in there. It's not going to damage it, which would destroy this. Get my hot water in there, then put it in the neoprene sleeve. It's going to stay hot longer and therefore resist freezing, which is a pain in the butt, depending on the temperatures you're dealing with. It's also nice to have a hot water bottle. You just want to keep it near you in your jacket or sleep with it as long as the top is on nice and tight, right?
Not only is the pad wet, the bag is completely soaked.
Anything on the other side there? These are bags for my water filtration system, which I use as Sawyer Squeeze. And you see I have 1 bag for clean water that I filter into, 2 bags labeled dirty that I collect water in and then run through the filter system, which is elsewhere in the pack. Now I should point out, on that deeper winter trip, wouldn't bother bringing a filter at all. I'd have to worry about it freezing and it would be a pain in the butt. I would just melt snow because there's plenty of it laying around. Bring a stove, extra fuel, melt snow, you're good to go. In this particular situation, I don't think it's going to be that much snow laying around. I'm just going to make sure to keep my filter nice and unfrozen, even if I have to keep it in my pocket. I already found water sources that seem pretty reliable based on my research, and I'll be just filtering water instead of melting snow. What else is over here? Later on, you're going to see my stove. This is just a windscreen for it. This particular windscreen is a small piece of titanium flashing. You could totally use aluminum. This is just a little bit lighter and yet plenty strong. And I just keep this around. You'll see my stove later. It just blocks wind. 2 really important things that you can do to make your fuel last a lot longer. A, put a lid on whatever you're heating up. Sounds simple, but a lot of people forget it. I know I do. And a windscreen. Even if it doesn't seem windy, pop that sucker up. You're going to notice that it starts blocking wind from somewhere, most likely. You're going to get a more efficient burn and use less fuel. Also, you'll notice on here, I rounded the corners because they were really sharp. So I just took this and some scissors and I rounded those corners, including on the fold there. And that way, when it's in my pack pocket, it doesn't snag anything. I also made sure to keep it in that outside pocket, which is a little bit more robust, this heavy grade material, rather than having it in my pack and snagging a jacket or something. I'm gonna knock out these hip belt pouches and then I'm gonna jump to clothes real quick before we get into the interior of the bag. So real quick, you see the Ohm has these really nice big pouches. So what do we got in here? A GPS unit. Some people ask what I use. This is a Garmin Oregon 650 model. A lot of you out there have suggested the phones. I think some of these phone apps sound like they work really well, so go for it if that works for you. I, for the videos and for posting on my website, record pretty extensive track data, and I want something separate from my phone that is reliable, its own battery system, and just nice to use. This has a touch screen, so I like that. And it is nice. It's 6.5 ounces, but it sounds like a lot, but actually it's the same weight as 2 National Geographic maps. So when you put it in perspective, not too bad considering all the data in that thing. That's the extent of that hip pouch. This one over here, got my headlight, Phoenix headlight. It's a single AA system. I think it goes up to 180 lumens. Not super crazy bright, but it also has a decent battery life. It's plenty of light for what I'm doing out there. Oh, okay, this little multi-tool credit card. When I go out by myself, I often don't get super creative with fires and stuff. Sometimes I don't even have them. I don't get real bushcrafty, and if I ever did lean that way, it would be with friends most likely.
I'd say we are good.
Little buck knife flip. Get ours in the middle there.
God, look at that.
That's amazing. So this little tool actually has everything I need. Now, often I do carry just my little trusty pocket knife here. I love this thing, and for small tasks, gets the job done. Again, you're not going to like build a raft out of it, but it works, right? But it's also 2 ounces just for the knife. This little guy is 1.3 ounces, and inside, I'll run through it just real quick. Actually has a little knife in there with a little groove on it. Gets the job done. It's almost as big of a blade as that knife I just showed you. It's got a can opener / bottle opener, some screwdriver heads, tweezers, toothpick. It's got a little compass on it that, yeah, probably not the most quality compass in the world, but guess what? Once you pull all the metal stuff out of it and I hold it in my hand, it's pointing right at north. I know north is over there because that's where I aim my antenna to get all my lovely Philly over-the-air programming. And a magnifying glass. So for an ounce or so, not too bad. Speaking of compasses, got a legit compass here. Just a simple Brunton compass, really lightweight. Use it as a backup for direction to my GPS. Always good in case GPS fails. Also, all these electronics you see, I carry spare batteries, but I'm not really including that so much because that is a consumable. And all of my weights listed on the list include the initial set of batteries with that item. Little fire steel by Light My Fire. It's a mini fire steel. That will light my stove. It's really convenient instead of matches, and also starts a fire if you lose your lighter. This is a little Eddie Bauer lighter from like 1970 that my dad gave me. It's refillable, little tiny guy. Now, I want to point out for you guys, some of the stuff in these hip pockets here, I film my videos extensively, so I actually have a separate front pack with my camera gear in it. I'm not going to include that because it just doesn't really apply to what a normal backpacker does. But because I'm carrying that front pack with the camera gear, stuff like this I actually have in my front pack for convenience. So in reality, if this was in my hip pouch, I probably wouldn't want to store these both together like this. Because, you know, just for safety's sake, if somehow this got compromised, the pocket dumped, or this thread broke, or whatever, I wouldn't want to lose both these fire sources at once. So I keep these in separate locations. One I keep in the pack, and one in my front pouch. Little chapstick, always nice. I bet I look so much better on camera now. Oh my God. Okay, I'm not making this up. Oh, I should have labeled that. Ugh. That's actually deodorant. Yeah, that's another story. Oh God, my whole mouth is dry. All right, I might have dry mouth for the rest of this video. Oh. A while ago, all you do is microwave some deodorant and you pour it into an empty chapstick tube, and then you get mini chapstick deodorant. But the downside is, if you do that, it's terrible. I need to find some real chapstick. Anyway, that's that. I'm going to move it out of the way real quick. We're going to go over the clothes that I wear, which is all listed separate. It is 7 pounds of clothes, but you'll see why in a minute. And it is for my coldest situation. Like I said, you could, for your trip, depending on the weather, omit some layers. So let's take this down. First things first, my hard shell outer layer. This is almost just like a rain jacket. There's not a whole lot to it. Mine's by EMS. You can get every brand basically has one of these. It's got some pit zips on there that I can keep open if it's not super cold and let me breathe. And it's nice and wind and water resistant. So that's all there is to it. By itself, there's no insulation or anything. So that brings me to my layer underneath. Now this is something I started doing. I originally used to just have my down layer, but I don't want to get that sweaty and messed up, and often I'd find myself taking it off because it was just too much. So we'll see the down jacket when I get into the pack. But what I like is this military surplus fleece jacket right here. It's like a micro fleece jacket. Compared to down, this is bomb proof. You can run it over with a truck or snag it on a tree and it's not the end of the world, unlike my ultralight down jacket. Of course, it is heavier for its warmth to weight ratio, but I do like it. I'm wearing it. I wear it often anyway, so it's not like it really feels any different. And coupled with that hard shell layer you just saw, that's basically my winter jacket right there. Here's my insulation. That was my outer layer. But the cool thing is, let's say my trip isn't in the teens and I show up and it's in the 40s during the day and dips at night. Well, while I'm hiking, this might be too much, so I just ditch it. I either don't bring it on the trip at all, which is possible, or for this trip, most likely, you know, I just tie it to the outside of my pack or shove it in the top of my pack for a little bit, and then when I stop, I can put it back on. And I've got myself a nice versatile jacket there. And those things are nice and cheap if you find them at the surplus store. Next up, I got a t-shirt as my base layer, synthetic, and then on top of that, a long sleeve tee. Now again, based on the temperature, might just do one or the other. If it's not real cold, the two of these together with that jacket might be a little too much while you're moving for sure. So one or the other if it's not cold, but that's my t-shirt and my long sleeve. The long sleeve is a really lightweight. I like that because I'm just supplementing with it. And I already have that other stuff on, so it works pretty well. Base layer for my legs, just long underwear. These are synthetic ones. You can do merino wool, whatever you're into. I think I have my other pair in the pack. My backup pair is merino wool blend. This is synthetic, whatever works for you, but I do like that because that goes underneath of, even in the winter, just standard hiking pants. These are the same ones I wear in the summer, spring, fall. The same exact ones. They still have the hole from when I tripped in New Hampshire and busted my face.
Don't fall, people, because this is what happens. I'm going to tell everybody that you backtalked me yesterday.
Memories. But anyway, that's them. Now, by themselves, these things aren't warm at all because they're lightweight and they're meant to dry quick. I like all the pockets on them, but the wind goes right through them. So, for moderately cold, if I pair this up with those base layer thermals that you just saw, it's pretty good. Wind still cuts through a little bit, and rain is going to get you. So that's when I have hard shell pants. Now these aren't real hiking brand pants, but I've been using them for years. I found them at like a TJ Maxx type situation. They're just like soccer warm-up pants, but I tested them. They're very waterproof. They're made out of polyester. And they're thin. This is just an outer layer that I put on so that if there's snow or rain or whatever, particularly rain, especially if it's going to go down to freezing at night, I don't want to get wet. This will keep me dry. It also blocks wind and it adds another layer. Again, if I show up and it is like 40 degrees instead of 9 degrees, could omit these completely as long as there isn't any precipitation in the forecast. If there is, maybe just wear these instead of the hiking pants. See what I'm saying? So I've got options. One thing I'm not bringing on this trip, I said I've used the system down to -20. That would be some more serious over mitts. I'm not bringing that, so just want to point that out. I do always bring this. I love it. It's a little face mask. Most of the time I do not wear it like this though. Pull it down like that and it turns into a scarf. And this really blocks the draft coming into my jacket. I find it keeps me way warmer. In fact, almost too warm very easily. It's very effective. And if high winds kick up, I pop it right back up, even covers my ears. I'm good to go. I love this thing. Then I got a more heavy duty beanie. This is actually not the one I usually bring, but I can't find my gray one, which isn't quite so foldy, but you know, I'll be stylish. And this is for actually hiking in. If it gets a little wet, that's fine, because you'll see later I have a spare one in my pack that I sleep in. Some winter gloves, right? Some heavier winter gloves. Rock and roll with those. Then I also got some glove liners. These are merino wool. That's better for transferring moisture and regulating temperature. They're nice and thin. I just put those on and slip them underneath them. And if my hands get too warm, which often happens when I really get going, then I take those larger gloves off. And these are usually just enough to keep the chill off of my hands. I also have spare gloves in the backpack. Pair of socks. These ones are mid-weight. A lot of times I start with heavyweight. It depends. I'm going to look at the forecast. So these might get switched to thicker socks, but I don't like my feet to get overheated when I'm moving. So I have a thicker pair for around camp. These are the middleweight socks. Underneath them, I have a mid-weight sock liner. Now, one of the viewers, very special thanks to you, sir, sent me some thinner weight sock liners, really thin, that are just for preventing blisters, not for warmth. That's awesome. But for the winter, I like these thicker ones. They're by Carhartt. They go underneath. They're going to add extra warmth because you've got a second layer going on there, but also they will avoid blisters, and these tend to, in my experience, wick away the moisture really well. So this keeps that moisture moving away from your foot, which is good. Last thing is the boot. And these things are heavy, as you'll see on the gear list. Wow, how'd you get up to 7 pounds of clothes? Well, according to my list here, 43 ounces for the pair. So yeah, that's pretty heavy. That's over a pound. It's like a pound 5 ounces per boot or something like that. But to put it in perspective, when's the last time you actually weighed just a regular pair of your shoes? You might be surprised. My Merrell trail runners that I just wear around town a lot of times are 1 pound 1 ounces. They're only 4 or 5 ounces less than these, so it's actually kind of impressive. These are pretty solid. I've had them for a while now because I don't go winter hiking nearly as much as non-winter hiking. They don't get a ton of use, so they are still hanging in there, although it's probably time to get a new pair pretty soon just to keep that tread nice and grippy, but they're hanging in there. I like the garments. All right, cool. Got the pack down to a more accessible level. Also, there's a couple items I guess I haven't mentioned yet. There's a S-beaner on here, no particular usage. I just carry an extra S-beaner. The weight is included on that list. It's like an ounce just to have around. Also, my Spot Messenger. This cost me about 4 ounces, but a lot of peace of mind. I have a separate video talking all about this, but basically I can send messages to my wife saying I'm okay, and a second one that says this is where I'm camping, and then there is ability to hit this SOS button, and then local emergency services will come out and hopefully save your butt. That is nice. There's a monthly fee on that, but I do like carrying that. Hanging right here, right up top there, nice and convenient. I can keep it tucked in there to keep it from bouncing around, but I want it accessible because it is a little mesh stuff sack with my Dutchware Gear Argon Sill pack cover. Stretches over this thing perfectly and keeps it nice and dry. And then when the rain or precipitation subsides, shove it back in the mesh pouch, which allows it to dry out. The mesh pouch, by the way, didn't come with it. It's from like a titanium cup I bought or something. I just repurposed it for that. Seems to work well. Here's that spare pair of gloves I was talking about. Now these are actually work gloves, so around camp doing chores, maybe collecting a little firewood, I could have these and keep my other gloves a little cleaner, but also in a pinch, I like everything I carry to be also looked at from the perspective of, uh-oh, something terrible happened, I got soaked or wet and now it's cold at night, so this is redundancy. Yeah, it's not the best thing in the world, but maybe with those glove liners, I got some backup gloves to at least keep the wind chill off my hands or something. So sometimes I even carry another pair of gloves. For this trip, I don't think so. If I was in like New Hampshire and more extreme or deep winter conditions, I'm all about spare gloves. That's fine. Here's a little stuff sack. It's a 4-liter stuff sack. I like to call it my when I get to camp stuff sack. So I'll show you what's inside here. Suspension system for my hammock. You'll see the hammock body once we get into the bag deeper. But this is my suspension. The system I use is called the Chameleon. It's by Dutchware. You can get the straps separate, but these come with it. So that's basically what I got. They're Dyneema straps. They are lighter, but just as strong as your normal nylon straps. They don't stretch. They've got the Carabiner system on there by Dutch for clipping around the tree real quick. And then the beetle buckle for adjusting the straps on your hammock to get the right length, angle, and all that. I'm not going to go into that here. There's a separate video on the Dutchware Chameleon that takes a close look at these straps and the buckle system, so check that out if you want, but we're going to move on. Next up in here is my bear bag line. This is not the one I usually use. I think I lost it somewhere. But anyway, luckily it's quite simple to make. It's a aluminum, non-climbing, lightweight carabiner in the middle there. And then I have 25 feet of Zing It line wrapped around it. That's it. Less than 2 ounces and I'm good to go. Got some fire starters in here. If fires are allowed in a particular area that I'm going, I'll carry these just in case. Again, on solo trips, a lot of times I just hike all day, get to camp, go to sleep. But if I do want to start a fire, there's 2 types here. I like these wet fires. They start even when wet and you can shave them. And then I only have 2 left of those. So this is some Coglin brand. What do they call them? Just fire sticks or something. It's basically just like wood pulp with some wax probably. Next up, here's the down jacket I was talking about. I've talked about this in plenty of vids because I've had it for years now. It's a Montbell down jacket. Fluffs out like that. It's very warm. Like I was saying before, a lot of times instead of that military fleece, I would just have this. Especially in not as severely cold weather, I would most likely wear just the t-shirts and the long sleeve shirt that you saw with the hard shell, and while you're moving, that would keep me warm. But for colder trips, I keep this on standby for at camp. I can wear it by itself, or like a New Hampshire trip, if it's really cold below 0, or where I'm going, if I get a cold snap for this trip, I could put on both. And now I've got double the warmth at least, or if something should happen during the day and I get that thing all wet, then there's my backup, put my hard shell back over it, and I'm in business. My toiletry kit, got some wet wipes in there. Hey, some guys go crazy with the wet wipes, that's fine, but weigh those things. They add up like crazy. So bringing a whole pack of those could be like over a pound. I personally just cut them in half and only bring like, say, a couple per day, especially in the winter. I'm not planning on sweating a whole lot and being super grungy, so that's fine. It's just a little cleanup at the end of the day. It's nice. Wipe your face off or whatever, and you're good to go. I got my contacts in here. What's missing is a little travel toothbrush. I got to buy a new one, but you know, a little travel toothbrush that comes with the mini tube of paste. I'm going to buy that at the drugstore and throw that in here as well. Spare t-shirt. For a warmer weather trip, I could probably go without the spare t-shirt and just go with the spare long sleeve you're going to see in here in a minute. Got another stuff sack here. My spare long underwear. My socks for at camp. Now this is the thickness I was talking about that a lot of times I actually hike in as well, but it depends on the temp. But for camp, not only do I have a thick pair of wool socks with me separate to sleep in, so they're nice and dry and comfortable, and they're also a backup if the other ones get screwed up, then I'll start hiking in them as well. But these ones are calf high. I think they call them the Hunter model. I forget the brand, they're probably Smart Wool, but look how long those are. They go all the way up the calf, so like really keep you extra toasty when you're at camp or sleeping. Okay, this empty bag here is not going to be empty during the trip. What I don't have in here is food. Now, I was thinking about doing a separate video on food for this video, but honestly, I already have a video I did. It's a couple years ago, but it's basically still my same philosophy. Some of the brands have changed, but basically it's my same thoughts. So I figure if you guys want to see specifically my thoughts on food, check that video out. I'll link it in this video, and it'll go in depth on food. And then if you watch the trip video, which I'll be posting next in this series, where we actually go out and do this trip in the wilderness in Grayson Highlands, I'll show all the food that I'm cooking there. So I think that'll pretty much cover the bases. But anyway, this here, and sometimes I even bring just a grocery bag and put all my food in there to keep it in one spot. Since I'm going alone and I'm in charge of bear bag, this is just a stuff sack. It's not waterproof like a dry bag, but you see it has that dry bag style locking top on there, and it's a water resistant, pretty heavily water resistant from my experience, material. So I can put my food in there and then hook my line up to it and hang it in the tree, and I'm good to go. And if I carry all my food up top here, because you'll notice this bag expands up pretty far, so even after I add my food, I'll still have plenty of space. Keep my food up top there, all in this, and just clip it on the bear line, and I'm good to go. Here's my spare hat. Primarily, my sleeping hat. It's a micro fleece, 1 ounce hat. Keeps my head warm when I'm sleeping in the hammock. My Cookset, I'll go through this real quick. Pull off the stuff sack, which just keeps it organized. Got a lid there, comes off. It's my titanium 750 ml pot. Around it, this is a homemade, separate video on this if you want to see how to make one of these. Not that you probably couldn't figure it out, but just to walk you through it. Reflectix Cozy, this is good for keeping this insulated if liquids are in it. And then also food pouches for dehydrated food meals. You can sit it in there while you're eating it. It keeps it hot, helps it hydrate faster, almost gives it a little rigidity for eating out of here, so that's nice. Next up, this is just a bag with some paper towels that I've cut into smaller squares for cleaning up. A little pouch of Sea to Summit pocket soap. It's just paper thin pieces of soap. Probably won't use this on this trip because I'll be eating stuff right out of the bags, but this is nice for cleaning up pots and stuff. Maybe your coffee cup in the morning gets a little gross, whatever. Or you get gross. That's some soap. Here's the stove I'm bringing for this trip. Hopefully the temperatures, like I said, won't be too cold, and this will work just fine. Again, separate video on this, but it's the $8 canister stove that I reviewed a while ago, and at this point I've had it for, what, 4 years? It's still going strong. Solid investment. Nice and light, like 3 or 4 ounces. Pop it right on top of a canister, put your pot on top. You're good to go. Now, somebody did ask if I still like Esbit and alcohol stoves. Esbit's the little fuel cubes. They're super lightweight. They don't burn as aggressively, but I like them for 3 season. But for winter, when it's colder, I just want to get my stuff cooked right away. I'm already carrying a little more weight anyway, so I'm good with the canister stove. But for my next solo trip, which will hopefully be in warmer weather, I'll probably go back to using the Esbit or the alcohol system. And also, if this was a super cold trip, maybe the forecast changes, or just on a different trip, you could always bring a stove that runs on white gas. It's going to perform a lot better at low temps than the canister stoves, which start to mess up around, what is it? I think once you get into the 20s, things are getting pretty dicey, if not even below 30, whereas white gas goes even lower. Or this particular model, my Rapid Fire, I can flip the can upside down, which most stoves can't do, and I can go in inversion mode for even colder. But this thing's all bulky and big. I don't think it's going to be that cold, so unless the forecast changes, I'm not going to bring that. Stick with the little pocket guy instead. Last thing in my kit here is a little plastic bag. Inside of it are other plastic bags. You can tell I'm trying to keep this stuff dry. Some matches, a backup mini lighter, some spare water bottle caps. That's another one that you often might not think of, but you drop the water bottle cap for either your Sawyer squeeze system or even just a disposable water bottle. You're kind of screwed, so some backup caps are nice. And then I cut the striker off of a matchbox, and that's so I can strike the matches in there if need be. I almost never use any of that. I just use the lighters, but that is a good backup. I also have some squares of tinfoil in there, which make a good backup lid, just a piece of tin foil over top. Or sometimes I take these same kits on all my trips. On a fun trip with friends, you might be cooking some steaks or something, you find a piece of foil comes in handy when you least expect it. What do I want to go into next? You know what? Let's get the outside of the pack out of the way, because I didn't even show you that. There's this big stretchy pocket on the ohm. Thing is like never ending. It'll eat the world. I put stuff in here that I want to get access to quicker at camp. So realistically, these are items in here that I would use first at camp or more frequently throughout the day, such as the aforementioned Sawyer Squeeze filter. I got it in a mesh bag that actually came with something else, but that way it does let it kind of air out in between uses, and then it's also in this mesh area here for breathing. The Sawyer Squeeze system, if you don't know about that, check that out. I got videos on it, other people do as well, but that's a nice gravity system that I have set up here with that tubing. Hooks right up to those bags you saw earlier, so I don't even have to actually squeeze my Sawyer Squeeze. Gravity does the work. Oh, yeah, you want this accessible, and you don't want to forget it. Toilet paper. You don't have to bring a whole roll and squash it down. I mean, maybe you do, but I like to just take some off of the roll, put it in individual bags, inside of bags, because you don't want that getting wet, and keep that accessible. First aid kit. Now, for example, I put it here because, again, you want it accessible. I made sure it was at the top of this outer pouch. In reality, because I'm carrying that camera pack system that I was talking about, it's right on my front, I keep this there, especially because sometimes I put this pack down and I walk around filming. I always have my first aid on me. That's just me, but either way, I'd say keep it accessible. Mine's pretty minimal. Do whatever works for you. This thing's it's under 2 ounces, all this stuff in there, maybe even 1.5 ounces. It's an assortment of bandages, some bigger ones. Ever since my incident with falling on my face, you know, I've learned to carry bigger bandages, some smaller bandages as well. I got some Benadryl in there, some ibuprofen, little tube of super glue. You never know what you could use that for. I got a little tea light candle in there. You never know. Seems weird. Oh, look, I even have a fast food restaurant plastic spoon. This thing could save you if you lose your spoon. It happens. So now you have a backup spoon in a separate area from your cook kit. I have lost a spoon on the trail before. Wasn't fun. I have some tubes of Neosporin in there, some gauze, and that pretty much covers the first aid kit. This guy's really crammed in there. There he is. One of my fave pieces of gear ever. Hammock gear, Cuban, whatever you want to say. Hex Tarp, C-U-B-E-N. All you got to know is stuff is super light and yet strong, and it's great for tarps. It's also killer expensive. I invested in one of these. I really like it. This is a 12 by 8.5 foot tarp, and it is, with the guy outlines and everything, 8-ish, 9 ounces at the most, I believe. Without the guy lines and everything, it's like 5 point something ounces. It's crazy insane. I don't have the bigger winter versions you can get that really make it like you're in a house with your hammock in between. I was in a storm in Colorado with Mike. It was pretty severe wind, sideways rain. I battened this thing down. Picture perfect backpacking campsite over here. I didn't have a lot of room to like have a tea party or anything, but I stayed dry, so I know it can get the job done. So this is coming with me. 2 items here. Got my spoon. It's a long handle version for getting down in those bags of rehydrated or dehydrated meals. In this little pouch here, titanium tent spikes, 0.2 ounces a piece, substantially lighter than the aluminum ones. These are not the ones that are really good in sandy soil. These are just the regular old spikes. I find that works for most of the stuff I do. And I got 6 of those. And the little pouch. Although honestly, if you don't want to carry a pouch, just take a little piece of shock cord, tie it in a circle, and I often use that just to keep them all bundled together. And all clear in there. Back to the big section. Another item that wouldn't necessarily come on a warmer trip or less severely cold, but this is a lightweight fleece. This can, at camp, be put on in addition to other stuff if it's super cold, or most likely, once again, I like that redundancy. I'm always picturing, after some of these experiences I've had, like Mike and I went on a trip in the White Mountains where it went up above freezing, like in the 30s during the day, and it rained on us. I mean, rained on us. Then at night, it swung down into the teens, if not single digits. Everything froze. We were okay, but if a jacket liner failed or water's running down the back of your pack and ends up going down and underneath of your hard shell, whatever, if you get soaked, that's terrible. That sucks. And I do carry synthetics because they're going to still at least operate with some composure even when wet. And yes, the best way to dry something when it's wet and synthetic is honestly to keep wearing it. But nonetheless, having a backup is good. So this is basically a backup to that long sleeve t-shirt you saw earlier, or I can supplement warmth with it. But might not come on every trip. Another item that might not come on every trip. And I'm still on the fence about this. I got to pay attention to the forecast because these are heavy. These are like 10 ounces. They're just like those other pants I showed you, the hiking pants, but they have a fleece liner, which is what makes them heavier, but they're also very warm. So now I have a backup pair of pants, but they also double as, and I did this on the trip with Mike when it was in the single digits. At camp, in the morning or at night, I would be wearing these instead, much warmer. Once I was hiking, I would rather be in the other pants because they breathe a lot better. Finally, to the hammock. Dutchware Chameleon hammock. Again, separate video on that if you want to check it out, go for it. But this is my hammock system, and you can see in my other videos that I do like hammock camping. I like it in the winter too. Some people are instantly going to say, particularly if they're not experienced with it or haven't seen it a lot, I'll try that in the summer maybe, but I would not want to try that in the winter. It seems way too cold. It might seem counterintuitive, but actually, in my opinion, much easier to stay warm in a properly set up hammock than on the ground. Because with my underquilt and top quilt, which I haven't pulled out yet, you basically have a whole bunch of down underneath you suspended so you're not crushing it. It's just fully loft. You got your top quilt over top, nice and loft. You're basically surrounded 360 degrees in a cocoon of down. And then you have your hammock. This particular one has a top cover, so instead of a mesh bug net, I switched that bug net out for a solid top cover with just a little vent so it doesn't get too steamy in there. Keeps the wind off of me, keeps the warmth in. I find it gives you another like 10 degrees of warmth in there. Then on top of that, you got your tarp pitched out, blocking the wind. I love it. Compared to a tent where I wake up in the middle of the night, I rolled off of the sleeping pad or my legs off and I'm wondering why I'm cold, or the air pressure went down my inflatable pad, now my butt's touching the ground. Just, I'm telling you, don't underestimate hammock camping in the winter if you have the right gear. Speaking of which, the next item, my top quilt, which looks very similar to my bottom quilt, and I think that was the last item. Actually, one looks a little bigger than the other, but I think it's because, see, these are both 0 degree models. I've got several models between my wife and I at this point. I have a 30 degree, which I used in 3 season. My wife has a set of 20 degrees, which I could probably get away with on this trip. It would save me a couple ounces, but honestly, if I bring the 0 degree set, I am good because I don't think it's going anywhere near 0 on this trip. Again, it could go in the teens though, in which case, might as well bring this for a couple ounces more. One goes underneath, one goes on top like a blanket, and you're nice and enveloped and warm. Now, it doesn't have a hood like a regular sleeping bag. That's why I carry that sleeping hat that I pulled out a little bit ago, right? That keeps my head just fine. It's nice and comfortable. It doesn't bother me. That's just me. And you know what? Oh wait, there is something else. Okay, a couple spare bags. No big deal, but I do like a gallon Ziploc bag, whether you're putting dirty clothes in it, trash, whatever. And the same thing for these, some sandwich bags, regular Ziplocs. I usually keep one in my pocket. If I have a snack, I throw my trash in there. Just keeps things clean. And then at the end of the day, you can put your trash right in the bear bag real easy. Now we're officially empty. That does it. I mean, that's everything with the exception of food. And like I said, you can watch that other video. And the only thing to really tell you is basically, you see this big old box? Now, my wife and I have come to really love Packet Gourmet. I still eat Mountain House and stuff too, but throughout the year, a couple times, we'll just do a massive order. Saves on shipping, and that way the stuff's already in your house, so when an impromptu opportunity for a trip comes up, you can just hit the trail. So I'm not going shopping for this trip. I'm just going to go through my box of goodies and see what I got. So I'm going to go through there based on a grid of each day that I'll probably jot down on a piece of notebook paper, pick out all of my meals. Then based on that grid, it shows me all the meals, which ones require heat. I can kind of gauge how much fuel to bring. In my case, I'm probably just bringing one of these mini cans. They're not the most cost effective, but they are small, and for a solo trip, pretty nice. Not just the weight savings, but the volume. So one of these cans should be fine, because a trick with these, if you've never really thought about it, you just weigh these things before a trip and after, and you can tell how much fuel you used in grams, and it gives you an idea for future trips. So this can here, it actually tells you on the side, it has 110 grams of fuel, which tells you that the can itself weighs about 100 grams, 101, but let's call it 100. So a little simple math and you can figure things out. So this one here, I wrote all over it. I took it on the trip with TJ up in the White Mountains in October, so it wasn't quite as cold. 3 days, 2 nights, same length as this trip, but with 2 of us using it. Went down to 130 grams from 210, so we did like 80 grams of fuel usage for 2 guys. So basically 40 grams of fuel was used a piece, and there's 110 grams of fuel in here, so I'm in good shape. Realistically, I actually have a partial can over there that has like 60 grams left in it from doing the math. could probably get away with that, but in colder weather, these things do operate down to a certain temp, like I said, but they operate the best when they're completely full due to the higher pressure in the can, as well as the way different elements of that fuel blend burn off, but we won't get into that. Anyway, the lower they get, the more they're adversely affected by cold temps, so I'll keep an eye on the forecast for this, but I think I'll just play it safe and bring this can. It's going to be about 7 ounces for a brand new one. That's fine. Sounds like a plan. So there you have it, my detailed gear list. I hope you guys like it. Check out my website. I got a PDF of this you can print out, or look in the description and there'll be a link to it as well, and you can play along at home. Check it out. And please, as usual, feel free to chime in. Give me any tips that you might have. Maybe there's some stuff here that I could have a different version of, or I could be treating differently. You know, whatever you found works for you. And if you're a newer backpacker or just interested in other people's setups, I hope you found this helpful. My lips are finally starting to undry from that deodorant that I ate accidentally. So until next time, I'm Syntax77, and you have fun out there.